After years of development hell, DC's The Flash is finally hitting theaters across the globe as of June of 2023. And what's more, early reactions have been praising it across the board, with some even going as far as to say that it's one of the best superhero movies ever made. Unfortunately though, the movie is also still marred in controversy thanks to its lead star Ezra Miller, who plays the titular character of The Flash. In fact, many moviegoers were surprised to even see the film released with Miller still in the lead role, after calls for a recast or a production shutdown flooded the internet after a string of felonies and charges were attributed to the actor over the past few years. And as reported in The Independent, a number of fans threatened to boycott the film entirely, with one on Twitter stating that, as long as Ezra Miller is attached, I will not be watching the movie or anything that has to do with it. Which raises an interesting question. Should The Flash be punished because of Ezra Miller's actions? That's what we're going to be talking about today, but before we dive in, please do make sure you leave a like on the video if you enjoy, leave your thoughts down in the comments below, and subscribe to get a brand new video every single week. To get us started, it's probably helpful to provide a rundown of what exactly it is that Ezra has done that has left fans so upset. Now, I'm not exaggerating here when I say that Miller's rap sheet is quite extensive and covers a good few years of their adventures. So I've broken down past events into as bite-sized chunks as I can manage, but if you do want any more in-depth information about any of this, a simple Google would be a good place to start. So we start in April of 2020 when a video surfaced of Miller choking a woman at a bar in Iceland. The woman later came forward to confirm that the actor had attacked her after they were joking about who would beat the other in a fight. Turns out it wasn't a joke for Ezra. Jumping ahead a couple of years, in March of 2022, Ezra was arrested and charged with disorderly conduct and harassment over two separate incidents at a karaoke bar in Hawaii. Apparently, they had become irate with the fact that people were singing in a karaoke bar and had lashed out as a result. Also in March, two Hilo residents filed a temporary restraining order against Miller, claiming that they had harassed and threatened them. Miller is quoted to have said, amongst other things, that they will bury you and your slut wife. A couple of weeks later, the couple requested that the judge dismiss their previous request. A month later, in April of 2022, Miller was arrested and charged with second-degree assault in Hawaii after being asked to leave an establishment, becoming irate, and then throwing a chair that struck a woman in the head and left a half-an-inch cut. In June, attorney and activist Chase Iron Eyes and his wife, Sarah Jumping Eagle, accused Miller of manipulating and controlling their daughter, Dakota Iron Eyes, since the two met in 2016. The parents claimed that Miller had been grooming their daughter since she was 12. Their daughter issued a statement on Instagram which downplayed the accusations whilst praising Ezra. However, the parents still remained worried after stating that their child does not have a phone, and so they doubt they would have written this statement themselves. Also in June of 2022, another parent sought legal action against Miller, claiming that they menaced their family one evening in their downstairs neighbor's home and acted inappropriately towards their child. The requested temporary harassment prevention order was granted. In August of 2022, Miller was accused of burglarizing a home in Vermont and stealing several bottles of alcohol. Later in October of the same year, Miller pleaded not guilty to these charges. Also in August, Vermont State Police attempted to serve an emergency care order to a 25-year-old woman who was reported to be staying at Miller's home along with her 3 children. This care order requested that the kids be taken away from the home and her care. Miller stated that they had actually left 2 months ago and were no longer on the property, but the state attorney believes that this was an attempt to evade the emergency care order. Also in August, Miller addressed their recent behavior with a statement to People, which read, "Having recently gone through a time of intense crisis, I now understand that I am suffering complex mental health issues and have begun ongoing treatment. I want to apologize to everyone that I have alarmed and upset with my past behavior. I am committed to doing the necessary work to get back to a healthy, safe, and productive stage in my life." And then, most recently, in January of 2023, Ezra Miller pleaded guilty to misdemeanor and began a 1-year probation. This was part of a plea deal struck that required prosecutors to drop 2 charges, including felony burglary and petite larceny, in return for a guilty plea to misdemeanor unlawful trespass into a victim's property in May of 2022 in Vermont. So yeah, a fair amount of discretions. And it may not be difficult now to see why fans were displeased with the fact that Ezra got to stay on in the role and is now being praised whilst attending red carpet premieres. And while that's understandable, is it fair to say that the movie itself, of which Ezra is only one part, albeit a fairly big part, should suffer because of their actions? For me, this conversation falls under the age-old question of should we separate the art from the artist? This question is probably one of the most hotly contested topics in the art consumer space. And it's being raised again and again more recently because of the seemingly never-ending amount of public figures who are finding themselves embroiled in some sort of problematic event. Now, this is not to say that it's only more recently that celebrities have started becoming problematic, but more of an acknowledgement to the fact that social media and the internet have made the lives of these celebrities a lot more accessible. Previously, many prominent figures would still express controversial opinions or exhibit controversial behavior, but not as many people would be reminded or even made aware of them in their day-to-day lives, making these realities a lot easier to ignore. If we bring it back to Ezra Miller and use recent events as an example, the fact that anyone with a social media account can express their opinion on this topic has resulted in these critical voices being a lot louder and a lot harder to ignore. The result of this? It's arguably more difficult in today's society to separate the artist from the art that they produce. But should we even be doing that? Well, that depends on who you ask. For example, an article from The Reflector states, while it is difficult to look at the art in the same way when we know about the wrongdoings of the artist, we must do exactly that. We must attempt to separate the art from the artist, because good art is good art because of its quality, not the quality of the artist. Essentially, once the artist has produced and released the art, it takes on its own identity of sorts, and therefore must be considered and judged as a separate entity. However, an article published in the Commonwealth Times argues that this separation is impossible. They use the example of R. Kelly, a once celebrated music artist whose reputation was destroyed after the release of the documentary Surviving R. Kelly, to illustrate their point. In the article, they specifically reference 2 of his songs: The Greatest Sex, which is about him having sex with his then wife Aaliyah, who was 15 at the time, and Down Low, which is about keeping an abusive love affair secret. They use these examples to highlight the fact that separating the reality of R. Kelly's actions from his music is impossible due to the fact that his music is literally about these problematic behaviors. The article sums up their sentiments towards the idea of separating the two by saying that this phrase is just a lazy cop-out that gives fans an excuse to not think critically as to why they continue to support problematic artists. A counterpoint to this argument is offered in the Bradford, which says that one must also view the relationship between an artist and their art as analogous to that of a vendor and their wares. In a market economy, consumption is impersonal. Essentially, separating an artist from the art they produce is no different from separating the company behind a brand name from the products that they produce. The article uses the examples of Kellogg's and Nike, both of whom have been proven to have problematic production processes involving the exploitation of their workers, including children in Nike's case. Despite this, both are viewed largely as just a logo by the majority of consumers, who will have no idea or even care about the controversies surrounding the companies. I would argue here that this is a much easier process than the separation of art from the artist, because the latter is intensely more personal. When you buy a box of cornflakes, for example, the owner is a faceless brand name, whereas when you listen to a song or a certain film, the owner is a lot easier to identify and therefore connect with. Now, all of this can make it feel like the answer to the initially posed question is a subjective one based on one's own morals and judgments. And to an extent, it is. Whether or not you personally decide to cease interaction with a certain brand or person is dependent entirely on your judgment of the severity of their actions and the resultant implications. However, it is also important that we hold people accountable for the things that they've done, especially if their actions fall into criminal activity. It's sometimes easy to see artists as being on a pedestal or being above society because of the idolization that's frequently attributed to them. But we must remember that they're also humans, and therefore they must abide by the same rules and laws that the rest of us are bound to. This quote from the Harvard Crimson sums up this section in a really nice way. As consumers, we must be mindful of where we spend our money and who receives our glorification. But it is unrealistic to completely remove these artists from the mainstream. We can acknowledge their contributions without allowing celebrity status to enable and normalize abuse and bigotry. So then, where does all of this leave us with our initial question of whether or not we should punish the Flash because of Ezra Miller's actions? I want to make it clear here that what I'm about to say is my opinion and does not pose as a definitive answer to this question. My opinion has been drawn after reading multiple sources on the subject and assessing my own morals and judgments. You may disagree with what I'm about to say, and that's absolutely fine. In fact, I welcome you to leave your opinions down in the comments once you're finished watching this video. So, should The Flash be boycotted or punished because of what Ezra Miller has done? Well, in my opinion, no, it shouldn't. I completely understand the point of not wanting to support the film due to not wanting to support Miller, but the film has been in production for a lot longer than Miller has been an issue. And to me, it seems unfair in this case to punish the filmmakers who worked to bring this movie to reality just because they worked with someone who later exhibited problematic behavior. With that being said, I do think it's really important that we continue to hold Ezra Miller accountable for their actions and implement punishments off the back of them. Recently, Ezra attended red carpet premieres for the film, where he was applauded and praised as if nothing had ever happened. This isn't us holding them accountable, and in my opinion, Ezra should not have been allowed to partake in these events. Bringing it back to the final quote that I used earlier from the Harvard Crimson, we need to be mindful of who we glorify and not allow celebrity status to enable or normalize problematic behavior. Ezra Miller has not yet shown that they have learned and grown from their previous actions, and so they shouldn't receive praise or admiration until they have done so. This film could have easily been promoted, marketed, and premiered without them being physically or personally involved in any of these events. The cast is stellar, including Michael Keaton, Ben Affleck, Sasha Calle, and Michael Shannon, amongst others. And the director is Andy Muschietti, an already acclaimed and celebrated filmmaker. It's not like the producers were short of stars to sell the film, so was the inclusion of Ezra Miller really necessary? Interestingly, according to recent box office numbers, it does seem that The Flash has had a pretty stagnant opening weekend, falling $4 million shorter than that of Black Adam. It's not clear yet whether this is the result of people boycotting due to the lead actor or if it's just a bad film, but I guess time will tell on that front. Also, and on a more positive note, it does seem that since accepting their 1-year probation and pleading guilty to misdemeanor, Ezra Miller is finally starting to clean up their act and working towards a healthier point in their life. Me personally, I hope this continues and that we've seen the last of Ezra's name being in negative headlines. So what are your thoughts? Have you decided to boycott the Flash movie, or are you on the side that we shouldn't judge the art because of the artist? Let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and of course, do leave a like if you enjoyed the video. It helps me out a lot. Also, subscribe to the channel if you want some more movie-based content because I post a new video every single week. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.